With 73% of large enterprises seeing DevOps as essential to digital transformation, organizations are looking to streamline development, manage technical debt, and leverage AI to make smarter product decisions, not just faster delivery. My name is Paul Nashawaty. I'm the practice lead and principal analyst for the AppDev practice. And I'm joined by 8Light's software delivery manager, Martin Gaston. Martin, how you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on the show.
Of course. Martin, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and a little bit about 8Light?
Okay, so 8Light, which is a really hard word to say out loud, 8Light is a outcomes-focused technical solutions consultancy. I'm sorry for using the C word right there. Please give me a chance. And I work for our marketplace engineering practice in London, where we mostly partner with big enterprise firms. So we're talking about S&P 500 scale organizations. And my actual role is, so I'm someone who wears a lot of hats, and I'll work with a client really to help them accordingly with whatever their biggest problem of the day is. So that might range from solution architecting and program managing, project managing a business team, or working with a tiger team to put together like POCs to get buy-in and validate ideas. So it's a fun role as long as I remember which hat I'm supposed to be wearing at any one time.
Well, it certainly sounds like you don't have a whole lot of time to sleep, and there's a lot of things changing, because I mean, this is a very, very hot topic that many of the industry, most of the industry is looking at right now. So when we're looking at this episode and we're exploring how the rise of AI is really redefining the future of DevOps, digital transformation, and modern software engineering, we're seeing how enterprises are really racing to blend intelligence into every layer of their operations, including the boundaries between strategy and strategic execution, design, engineering, and they're really blurring. They're really coming together. And Martin, it's really great to have you on, because we're looking at how this, the impact of working with collaboration and speed is coming together. And so I love to kind of talk through and explore how organizations can leverage AI-driven DevOps practices, managing technical debt, and align that innovation between business value and creating products as they really try to move to the market and really try to be competitive as we look at it. So Martin, let's jump right in. We're going to look at some of the topics that we talked about before the podcast here. We looked at the future of DevOps in this AI era, right? As AI becomes really embedded into every stage of the SDLC, or the software development lifecycle, from code generation to observability. How do you see DevOps evolving, and where do you see we're entering new phases of AI ops, or something even broader? How do you see this coming together?
So I think a really important first thing that I don't hear acknowledged enough is that, and I'm talking about specifically at the enterprise level, which is where I spend most of my time, but a ton of enterprise companies, I think, are still struggling to not organize themselves around a sort of very partitioned organizational chart, right? So that Conway's law is still, very much in effect. And I know we've got that powerful statistic of like 73% of companies view DevOps as essential, but I would be amazed if 73% of large enterprise companies have become comfortable with DevOps as it currently exists, let alone thinking about into the future. And I think that's still that classic figure 8 diagram that I think we've all seen, where you build up this wonderful positive flywheel and create teams that aren't just sort of kicking their problems down this sort of the stages of the release process. But when I think about AI sort of specifically, and where we're having great success on some of the teams that I work with, there's three-ish main themes that I think AI is really getting results today. And that's, one of the main ones is automation and observability across our tech stacks. We've, case in point, feeding logs to an LLM to find out where things have gone wrong. Like if you think about some large scale enterprise projects, you've got millions of log lines, and it really is like finding a needle in a haystack when everything's exploding at 10 o'clock at night and it's all gone down. And then of course moving that maturity level across to a more modern observability stack using tracing is a big, I'm a big fan of that right now. I think we're seeing great results in AI there. And just for me, not having to learn 1,000 different bespoke query languages to talk to my data has been incredibly empowering. But then there's also balancing delivery speed and maintainability, which I think we talk about a lot. I think we all feel very comfortable in that space. And then a big one that I was a bit cynical on this, but I'm starting to see big results is reducing technical debt and spending more of my time thinking about strategic goals rather than understanding the layout and structure and architecture of some of our legacy applications and our enterprise tech stacks.
Yeah, Martin, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, there's a lot happening here. When we look at the tools that are being used, the level of complexity, we're seeing in our own research that 75% of respondents use 6 to 15 different tools for observability alone. So there's just a lot of complexity. When we start looking at the term that I like to kind of use is more modernization, but it's really about digital transformation. We don't hear that as much anymore in certain pockets, but it's still a big factor. So digital transformation and business reinvention is really kind of occurring, right? So we see that this digital transformation is no longer just about modernizing systems. Modernizing is a treadmill exercise, right? It's always on, it always keeps going and such. But it is about reshaping how enterprises are operating and competing, right? And that really goes back to what you were talking about, which is efficiently putting together the right practices, the right initiatives, the right drive around the CI/CD pipeline, that infinity loop that you mentioned. But when you look at this, what strategies are proving most effective in driving sustainable transformation at both the technology level and the business model level? I mean, we hear a lot about technology and tech debt, but there's always, the element of people, process, and technology. So let's talk about the business model level as well.
Yeah, I think getting the tools into the hands of people is important. And that's probably an obvious thing to say, but especially when you think about enterprise, there's a 16-month procurement process to adopt the 17th tool in the stack, and then there's it takes a year to train everyone to use it. Like, I think getting people hands-on with some of these tools right now is incredibly important. And I don't want to dwell too much on which model is the best model, like which coding thing is the best one to be using, like whatever's working for a team. Like, I think sometimes it's almost much of a muchness, but actually getting people working in these agentic flows, having an AI partner by their side, like this is still being worked out with a bunch of clients that we work with. And so I think getting tools in people's hands is super obvious but super important. And then I think actually talking about it honestly and openly, like I think we're in a bit of a low trust environment in tech right now. And so I think you've got people that are using the tools and are a bit afraid to say it out loud because they're a bit worried. And then you've got companies that are also demanding that absolutely everything is done with AI all of the time, even things that would be better perhaps if it was done with a bit more of human in the loop. So I think actually getting trust back into one of our teams so we can actually have this discussion and very candidly say what's working and what's not working, I think is just as important as subscribing to yet another tool in the stack, although I'm sure there's plenty of people that would quite happily sell you that.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. I mean, there's a big difference between selling a point product solution and selling a overall, how you're going to change your model. I do want to kind of touch on something you said. Trust is a big factor here. When we're looking at bridging the strategy, design, and engineering, it's a big factor about how organizations are moving forward, right? Historically, what I've noticed, just kind of big change with the kind of the CI/CD pipeline in general is KPIs are changing. Like, they used to be very siloed, monolithic kind of approaches where DevOps was like, okay, push the big green button, get the code out the door. And, we run into problems later on, but that's really their goal, is to push the code out the door. Now we're actually seeing utilizing AI and tools in order to make the design and strategy more effective. So in this, and like what we're looking at here, Martin, in today's product-driven world, success really is about connecting the strategy, design, and engineering seamlessly, right? It has to bring it all together, and that trust kind of plays into this, right? But how can organizations break down the silos that we were just talking about and create a shared language across these multiple disciplines to accelerate the innovation? How do you build that trust?
Yeah, I often hear this affectionately called the convergence, which is a sort of very fun, extremely terrifying sounding title. But to me, it's the idea that the engineering team might not just be responsible for moving tickets from backlog to done. The product team might do more than put fabulous strategic documents together, and the whole delivery team might work together to be a bit more collaborative than being on a stand-up once a day and asking if anyone's got any blockers. So I think trust goes back to building empowered cross-functional teams that sort of go back to Dan Pink's classic motivation theory. So you've got teams with autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I think one area that AI is helping for a lot of our clients is that the education for some of these cross-functional roles, it really helps educate. So we've got, imagine you've got, enterprise teams always have this. They've got the service that no one's wanted to touch for 15 years, but it's also load-bearing and generates 90% of the company's revenue. I was working on one of these kind of services last week, and I used an AI agent I said, just make me a sequence diagram of the flow through the application. And sort of half like testing it, like, well, actually, would it actually be able to do this? And I sort of came back in about 10 minutes and it looked good. And then I, human in the loop, I checked it, and it was pretty much like fully accurate. And this would have taken an engineer days to do before, and a product person would have had to get an engineer involved, and they would have also taken days. So I think actually getting everyone educated much more quickly is something AI can be doing right now. And I think with that education, we can start to think cross-functionally. We can start to, engineers can talk about product, and product can talk about engineering, and it's a sort of very exciting time. But when you go back to sort of, the org chart again, it is a bit scary for these companies. But I think the quicker we can start having those chats, the better.
Yeah, I agreed 100%. I mean, I think that you touched on something that comes up very, very frequently in my practice, which is, bridging the gap between heritage environments and new environments, right? And that, but past, present, future is just it's the life cycle of app dev. It's the life cycle of what we do in this business, right? But like when you manage technical debt in these modern pipelines, it requires that rapid iteration between AI assisted development and speeding up the delivery. But technical debt is accumulating faster than ever, right? Like we're trying to, there's this kind of bridging thing where you have this heritage environment, like you said, is driving 80, 90% of the revenue in the business. That debt is there, but like that is not the long-term strategy. That is a movement from the heritage environment, right? But you have to have a new way to have these new practices and tools. And they're really, there's new ones emerging to manage, to prioritize, and even automate technical debt reduction. What are your thoughts around that happy medium between, you have the heritage environment, you got to keep it up and maintaining, but you have your net new environment, new processes, without forking the kind of process? How do you bridge that gap effectively?
Managing technical debt has been a big part of my life for most of my adult days. So I do think about it a lot. And I think there's a really huge point that's not getting enough consideration. And I think it goes to the stat that goes around where it's like most AI projects are failing right now. And I think it's because we can use AI tooling to really speed up the development, but some of the work required to get it into production, like that work just gets moved to a different part of the life cycle. And this can be really disruptive in the enterprise. I think if your company's reward structure is largely, and historically, I think quite a few places I've worked with are like this, it's sort of based on moving tickets, right? That's how you sort of get rewarded within the business. I've seen engineers in these companies sort of blaze through picking up tickets from backlog and moving them into code review and just repeating that over and over and over again. And that's really, you're starting to see the backlog of reviews just gets sort of exponentially longer. And this adds a huge amount of pressure to engineers who do spend their time working on these reviews, which if I'm being honest, I think can be a very underappreciated role in software engineering. And so I think we actually need to optimize that end-to-end flow, else we're just moving the bottleneck around, right? AI is helping us do one part of it, but the total time spent is about the same. And I think that just is where some of the negative sentiment is coming from. Like, you go, oh, I've been using AI and it's still taking me this much time to get anything to production. I think, well, you just move the pain somewhere else in the process. So I think companies need to look at their organization and structures to manage that technical debt as well.
Yeah, well, I do want to touch on that MIT study that is talking about the failure of AI projects, being 90+%. I think that the devils are in the details there as well. I mean, I think if you look at the experimental phases of a lot of things that are happening. You can kind of take out some of that. But with that said, I mean, AI obviously has a valid role, right? And like to your point, reorganizing and understanding how to use the tools in your toolbox in order to get your job done is incredibly important, right? So when we look at human plus machine collaboration in DevOps, this is that human in the loop factor, right? I mean, like to your point, as automation and AI kind of really reshapes the role of DevOps teams, the skill sets and mindsets really have to change, right? And this kind of evolution is, maybe becoming a prompt engineer or maybe becoming understanding exactly what you're doing. It's no longer about writing specific lines of code, but it's about accelerating, the review process so you can get things out the door faster and such. But to your point, with these changes, Martin, when we look at the DevOps teams of tomorrow, right? What becomes the most valuable skill set for engineers and leaders to stay relevant, and effective for this new kind of hybrid era of like what's happening with this human in the loop, but then looking towards an autonomous kind of a utopian view, right, so to speak?
Yeah, so you might be able to tell from my accent, I'm quite British. I've been very cynical on AI for a bit. And I have really, this year's been very transformative for my thinking, right? So I'm thinking about sort of how the human and machine collaboration piece is a big part of my day-to-day life now. Where we're seeing fabulous results is in multi-agent orchestration. And so one of my running themes through this whole chat, I think, is wearing the many hats, and maybe that might be some of my own personal role bias from how I work, but it goes into how I'm using AI now as well. So I have multiple agents that are all wearing their own hats. And I think you can have a human and AI sort of pair on each stage of this process, right? So I think a lot of us have used AI assisted tooling to generate code, which is probably the most sort of famous pairing of the lot right now. And I think we've all seen that it can certainly write a lot of code extremely quickly. But one area we're seeing some great results with some of our clients is actually having another AI agent work at the code review stage. And so that might look like coming into the process at the very end. It evaluates the original issue on Jira or Linear, and it compares it directly with the diff in the pull request and then leaves notes directly on it. So that's another pairing, right? You've got a human that's reviewing that code and an AI agent that is helping that part. And then I think we're also starting to see a lot of people use AI at the other end of the product lifecycle. So this is where Google and Gemini, I think, are making a big part of their play. And that's where people use an agent to work out product requirements, disseminate research, put a plan together. And again, it's really valuable there. So I think part of the success is working out to beat the hats analogy to death, like is which hat am I wearing at any point in the day, and then how can I have an agent that works alongside me with that, rather than doing one prompt that says make the app, which is where it starts to fall down a bit. And the last trick I think that I'll say is that sort of knowing when to sort of seed to the AI in your team and organization is very important, right? So I personally am still not comfortable not having a human in the loop on approving a pull request, right? At least not yet, right? That's just, maybe some people are, but that's a bit too dangerous for me right now, and I'm not there. And I sort of personally as well, when we think about sort of the product design aspect, I have I don't know about you, but I have a really negative response when I feel like I'm looking through like a long planning document and I'm like, hang on, was this entirely created by AI? Like it was a bit disrespectful of my time. And even if it's like bang on the money, I just feel a little bit like, I feel a bit cheated here. Like I kind of wanted to feel the human element in the planning as well. And maybe that's just, as a consultant, I think if I handed that to a client, they'd be like, what am I paying you for? So, maybe it's a survival mechanism for me. But no, those are two areas where I feel a little bit uncomfortable. So I think it's about knowing when you let the AI do its job and when you do your job as well. So I think even spending a bit of time reflecting on where you add the value is an important part of the process now too.
Oh, Martin, I agree. I mean, I think, in our own research, we're finding that 67% of organizations are hiring generalists over specialists because they need that kind of jack of all trades, right? That can kind of get everything done. But to your point, AI is a tool. It is not a replacement of the intellect or intelligence from an individual. It's a tool. But, Martin, there's a lot here to talk about, and there's a lot for organizations, regardless where they are in their journey, or they could be very early in their journey or very mature. Where would you recommend our audience here go to learn more about, the topics that we're talking about with AI adoption, AI maturity, whether or not people are worried about losing their jobs? I don't know, whatever the case may be. But where would you advise people to go?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't plug 8flight.com, where we've got some fabulous white papers and insights. I am very happy to continue this conversation with anyone on LinkedIn. I'd love to be talking to people about it. And then I'm also a big fan of the Pragmatic Engineer newsletter, which is not sponsoring me in any way, but I think that's something I like to read every week, and has helped frame my thinking.
Well, Martin, I really appreciate you joining me today. This is a really important topic. It's really important for the industry to think about as we go and we get ready for 2026. Many organizations are trying to figure out where they want to go and how they want to, shape their budgets, shape their resources, their initiatives. So I really thank you for joining me today. And a big thank you to all of you who've tuned in. We really appreciate you being part of the AppDevANGLE community. But for now, that wraps up this episode, and we'll be back next Wednesday to cover another conversation diving into the tools, trends, and talent shaping the future of application development. So whether you're deploying at the edge, building an AI, or modernizing your cloud stack, we've got you covered. Be sure to follow us on social if you have any thoughts, questions, or just want to connect. Until next time, stay curious and stay building.